What if I told you that while you were working 50 hours a week to pay your taxes, the federal government was spending your money on shrimp treadmills, gender studies programs in Pakistan, and a $50,000 a day consulting contract for work that was never delivered? That's not a conspiracy theory. That is the documented, verified reality that one team of outsiders finally dragged into the sunlight. For decades, the United States federal government operated like a company with no shareholders, no auditors, and no consequences. Every year, Congress passed spending bills that ran thousands of pages long. Nobody read them in full. Nobody was supposed to. That was the point. Between 2020 and 2024, the national debt grew from $5 trillion to $36 trillion. Think about that number for a moment. $36 trillion. If you spent $1 million every single day since the Roman Empire fell, you would still not have spent $36 trillion, and yet Washington kept asking for more. Budget after budget, continuing resolution after continuing resolution. Trillion-dollar stimulus packages, emergency COVID spending bills that nobody audited, infrastructure money that sat unspent for years, foreign aid that went to countries that openly despised us. The American taxpayer was told, pay up, shut up, and trust your betters in Washington to handle it. But here's what they didn't count on. A new administration came to power in January 2025, and it brought with it a mandate unlike anything Washington had seen in a generation. President Trump signed an executive order on his very first day back in office, creating the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And Washington has never been the same. The Department of Government Efficiency was not a traditional government agency. It had no massive bureaucracy, no career staff that had been in the same chair for 30 years protecting their turf. It was lean, fast, and driven by people who actually knew what efficiency looked like, because they had built it themselves in the private sector. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur who built Tesla, SpaceX, and X, agreed to lead the effort. He brought with him a team of engineers, data scientists, and financial analysts who looked at federal spending the way a forensic accountant looks at a crime scene, methodically, ruthlessly, without sentiment. Within the first 60 days, the DOGE team did something the federal government had never done before. They actually went through the contracts, line by line, agency by agency. They got access to the Treasury payment system that processes every dollar the federal government sends out. And what they found was staggering. Thousands of contracts that had never been properly reviewed. Vendors being paid for services that no longer existed. Federal agencies running duplicate programs, sometimes 3 or 4 agencies doing the exact same thing, paying the exact same people, reporting to different congressional committees that never talked to each other. Musk testified before Congress in March of 2025. He was direct, he was unapologetic, and the media lost their minds. Let me give you the receipts. Because the mainstream media spent most of 2025 trying to discredit DOGE, and they did not want you to hear what was actually in these reports. The DOGE team identified over $400 billion in potential savings in the first 6 months alone. Let me repeat that. $400 billion in 6 months. They found a program inside the State Department that had spent $900 million promoting gender ideology in foreign countries, including nations that are openly hostile to the United States. Your tax dollars, sent overseas, to push an agenda most Americans never voted for. They found contracts with federal IT vendors that were billing the government for software licenses, for software that had been discontinued years ago. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had checked. The bills just kept getting paid automatically. They found a government-funded media outlet that received over $500 million in federal subsidies per year, while running content that explicitly attacked the very administration it was asking for money from. The funding was cut, the outlet screamed about freedom of the press, but nobody could explain why American taxpayers should subsidize their critics. They found pension payments going to federal employees who had been dead for years, Social Security numbers being used by people who had never existed, duplicate payments going to the same vendor under slightly different company names. They found that USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, had sent over $1.6 billion to programs that could not be audited in countries that had no accountability mechanisms whatsoever. Every time the DOGE team found something, they published it on the website, publicly, with the details, because sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the swamp hates sunlight. Here's the part the media really didn't want you to know. The resistance was immediate, furious, and it came from exactly the people you would expect. Career federal employees, people who had worked in these agencies for 20 and 30 years, filed lawsuits. They went to the press, they leaked documents, they did everything they could to slow down, obstruct, and reverse what DOG was doing. Federal judges, some of them appointed by previous administrations, issued injunctions. They tried to block DOG's access to the payment systems. They tried to reinstate fired employees. They tried to protect programs that had no defensible reason to exist. Democratic senators held press conferences. They used words like assault on democracy and constitutional crisis. They claimed that reviewing how taxpayer money was spent was somehow an attack on the American people. Think about that. For decades, the American people demanded that someone, anyone, actually look at where their money was going. And when it finally happened, the people who had been wasting that money called it an attack. Headline after headline focused not on the waste that was being uncovered, but on the personalities involved, on Elon Musk, on the process, on anything except the $400 billion in waste and fraud that had been sitting in plain sight for decades. But something interesting happened. The American people, the actual working people who pay taxes and watch their paychecks shrink every 2 weeks, they weren't buying it. Poll after poll showed strong majority support for what DOGE was doing. Because Americans have common sense, and common sense tells you that a government $36 trillion in debt probably has a waste problem. By mid-2026, where we are right now, DOGE has documented over $1 trillion in identified savings and fraud prevention measures. That number is contested. It is argued about, but nobody credibly argues it is zero. The federal workforce has been restructured. Hundreds of programs have been eliminated or consolidated. Agency budgets have been cut, foreign aid has been reformed, and for the first time in a very long time, there is actual accountability inside the federal government. Is it perfect? No. There will be mistakes. There will be programs that were cut that perhaps should have been saved. That is what happens when you clean out a system that has not been cleaned in 50 years. But here's the truth that matters. Your government is your money. The federal government does not have its own resources. Every dollar it spends came from your paycheck, your business, your family. You have a right to know where it went. You have a right to demand accountability. And for the first time in most of our lifetimes, you are starting to get it. The story of DOGE is not finished. The fight over government spending, accountability, and the future of this country is just getting started. And we are going to keep covering it. The facts, the names, the dollar amounts, right here on America First Daily. If you believe that truth matters, if you believe that your tax dollars deserve accountability, if you want the kind of deep dive reporting that the mainstream media refuses to do, then hit that subscribe button right now. Ring the bell so you never miss a video, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This is America First Daily. We are not going anywhere.